Well, Chris, it's a real pleasure having you on. Before we dive into the conversation, I got to tell you, right, the first DEF CON I was ever at was the DEF CON that you spoke at, where you were talking about how to, essentially fraudulently, submit and get someone's death certificate. And that, like, I mean, that just like opened my mind to this whole world of like, wait a minute, the government is still run largely on paper, right? So how easy is it to do fraudulent things with, applications? And it just like made me go down a whole rabbit hole. So like that was a really fascinating talk that I heard you for my first ever DEF CON.
I'm glad you got to see it live.
Yeah, yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, from what I remember, right? Because I was, might have been a few drinks in that day, as one is at DEF CON, and given it was like 8 years ago, at this point, but it was fantastic, and the humor that you wrap into it is just hilarious with having Jeff Moss on the death certificate while we're at DEF CON.
Yeah, I was like, well, I'm at DEFCON and, everything's up for grabs. It's supposed to be disobeyed, so let's put our money where our mouth is, and I'll put the host up to be killed.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic. Well, Chris, I start everyone off with telling, their story, right? How did you get into security? How did you stumble upon it? What piqued your interest? That sorts of things, right? Because I have an audience that is younger in their career that is looking to get into security, or maybe they just made that jump, right? And hearing everyone's story will really add, to their own mentality of thinking, okay, this is possible. This is something that I can potentially do, and just helps them along the way.
Yeah, so for your new listeners, let's let them know there's no rush. This is not one of those, I've got to get pen testing in the first 3 years and I've got to do forensics or all of that sort of stuff. I've been doing this stuff for 30-something years. So I started essentially as a child. I was born at the right time, 1973, like probably 8 years before computers became, I would say mainstream. But so I found something I loved. Before that, it was, I'm obsessed about things like train sets and nerd stuff like that. And when computers came along, my mum and dad was shocked when I sold my train set to get my first computer. So I essentially, you put an obsessive kid, whether you call it autistic or Asperger's or anything that's neurodivergent, you put someone in front of a computer and they're at home. They love spending time in front of the computer. So I have essentially spent my life in front of a computer. We're talking, before the modem days, then the modem days, and then the internet. So in terms of career, I went to university to do comp science because that's what you did when I turned 18. And I flunked out because it was boring. I hated coding. And then the following year, I thought, I'll do it. I'll try again. So I went into university, college again, and flunked out again. I thought, oh, shit, I really should buckle down. But I don't like university. I thought it was boring. The stuff that I'd been doing pre-uni, I already knew all this sort of stuff about, CPU architecture and stuff like that. I just hated coding. I just thought it was boring. And then I tried again the third time and failed again in first semester and thought, man, this is not for me. And then I went straight into the workforce. So I got a job at a university just doing IT. I did help desk for a year and a half. That was a shit job. But then I started to learn the systems at the university, things like at those days we're talking about Unix and VAX and, Sun systems and, PCNFS and Cat5 and coax and all that sort of stuff. And then after that, I then got a job at a bank. And just to make sure your listeners don't get too bored, I spent 10 years doing IT and then IT security in 4 different banks. So then you get to learn how systems really, plug and how things are important, check clearing times and you learn really good practices working in a bank. My dad always said, make sure you get a job at a bank because they sell money. Don't work at someone that sells, like Target that sells, and sorry for anyone working at Target selling underwear and stuff like that, because you always have money at a bank. And then after that, I saw some pen testers coming into the bank. So this is what I was, in my late 20s, coming to the bank and doing a pen test. And I noticed that they were relying on tools such as, back then it was things like Nessus and stuff like that. And your listeners will know when you're doing a pen test, it relies on banner information that comes back from a host. Are you a Windows host? Then try these exploits. Are you Sun host? So I used to screw with them and then changed all the host banner information and all the port numbers so they couldn't A, find the ports using standard tools, and B, it would change the banner. So instead of if they were hitting a Sun system, I'd change the banners, the enumeration to a Windows server and watch them then fail. And then watching them fail and then having to resort to manual tools, which they didn't have any skills doing it. So back then, these were the big auditing firms, the EY, KPMGs and stuff like that, doing pen tests as a side gig for their key function, which is auditing. And then I said, shit, there's a market here for pen testing. So I then went and set up my own company and then started doing pen testing and then picked up some big clients really quick because, I've been doing this, at that stage for 10 plus years. And I found it really easy. So, picked up clients like American Express and stuff like that, went around the world and spent a lot of time in the Middle East. And then the latter part of my career, just to speed up 10 years, I had a client of mine who I did a pen test for, and we'd been in the environment for maybe a month or so, and they had no idea we were in the environment. They said, look, what tools are out there to detect hackers once they're inside? I said, well, you need things like EDR and SIEM and all that sort of stuff. So I put them in touch with Splunk. They got a quote for Splunk, which was like $1 million plus. And they said, well, we can't afford that. So what else is there out there? And we said, well, you could go the open source route. And, at that time there was Elk, Elasticsearch. They said, well, we don't really have the skills for that. Can you build us an Elk platform? We said, look, we're pen testers. We don't really do that. But if you sponsor us, the word sponsor, as in pay, we will have a look at, putting our Elk solution in for you. And that was essentially day one of Sea Monster. And, since 2015, I've been working on a company called Sea Monster, co-founder and CISO, where we build SIEM solutions for companies using open source tech so they can detect breaches within their network using the experience we've had pen testing and stuff like that.
Huh. Wow. That is, that's really fascinating. And there's a lot to unpack there. So, I've spent quite a few years in the financial industry myself. And it seems like it's always just so much easier to go from one financial company to another, whether it be a bank or, even the Federal Reserve, right? Or other, credit companies, mortgage companies. If it deals with, money in that way, it's very easy to just get that jump. Is that something that you experienced then as well? Or is this kind of something that was brand new where if you just had the technical skill set, they would take you?
So for me, once you've worked at a bank, it's easy to move to a bank in terms of employment history. He worked at Australia's biggest bank, so working for Australia's second biggest bank, that's really easy. But I found that internally it was pretty much the same stuff. They might be using different systems, different architecture, but again, they have a lot of risks, and your job is to minimise those risks. And so you essentially come in as a white knight. And to be honest, when I go into a company, I like if they've got, say, 70 issues that need to be rectified, and I can get that down to a low number like 2 or 5. My job is done. I don't then hang around. I don't like doing. I'm not going to say the word blue tea. I don't like just hanging around doing status quo. I prefer to do something new at that stage. I get bored.
Yeah, like a lot of us in this field, like we easily get bored and have to find other things. Like when Chris Roberts gets bored on an airplane, he starts doing weird things that gets him in trouble, right? But how did you get to the point where you decided that you wanted to become a DEF CON speaker, right? Because that's not, at least for me, right? Like, I don't want to call it a goal, right? But it would be really cool if it happened, but I'm also totally fine if it doesn't happen, right? Because I don't really like speaking a whole lot in front of a whole bunch of people. And I also don't think that I have anything or know anything of enough value to actually, speak about, right, at a conference. Like that's just me. That's my own personal issues that I have to work through, I guess, with a therapist or something, right? But, how did you, I guess, did you come up with the idea of I want to be a speaker at DEF CON first and then find something to talk about? Or did you stumble upon your death certificate vulnerability, so to speak, and then you're like, oh, I should tell people about this at DEF CON?
Yeah, so it's great questions, by the way. So it's actually the first one. So I went to DEF CON 22 and thought, oh, actually, it might have been 21. Thought, oh, this is awesome. DEF CON, I finally found my people. And then at that stage, the thought of talking at that stage, so I could do a talk, didn't have anything to talk about. So I thought, yeah, I could do a talk. And then it just went away out of my mind, and that's completely fine. And coming back to what you said is, the talk then came to me. You're like me, that you'll probably study a topic to death and you'll know it inside and out. I don't like public speaking either. Like I may be good as a public speaker or average as a public speaker, but actually, I don't like it. I prefer to do not public speaking, if that makes sense. So for me, I just and that sounds really weird, but I let my subconscious do the talking for me. So the ideas come to me, when you have that idea, that light bulb moment, and that's your subconscious saying, oh, that's an idea. So I stop reading, if that makes sense. I let myself just relax, get all the shit out of my brain, get Twitter out of my brain, get infosec out of my brain, get everything out of my brain, and just relax, whether that be meditation, walking, in the bush or, through a forest or whatever like that, or just shut the hell up for 5 minutes. And then things will come to you, that your inner voice will come out saying, hey, I've got a great idea. And then you get your conscious mind around that topic. So for me, it was just, I think I was watching some TV and I noticed a news article that, someone had a Melbourne hospital had accidentally killed 200 people. And I thought, oh, that's pretty weird. How the hell did that happen? And then, you start to, as I said, you let your subconscious do the thinking for you and think, well, how does that possibly happen in this day and age? And then you apply your conscious thought. So then you start researching the hell out of it, which is what our skill set is. We research the hell out of a topic. I spoke to doctors, funeral directors, probate people, the whole works. Studied the hell out of it, and then that became the talk topic. And then obviously I submitted at DEF CON and got accepted. But that's the path. I try to relax. Don't think, if you try to think, I need to do a DEF CON, I need to do a DEF CON talk, it doesn't, well, it may work for some people because they're already doing research in that. But for me, it doesn't work that way. And the same thing happened in my second talk. I think my wife said to me, oh, you need to do another DEF CON talk after the first one. And I said to her, it doesn't work like that. You can't just come up with a DEF CON talk. So I was falling asleep. That lull of sleep just before you fall asleep. And then I had a great idea and it just popped into my head just, when you said that subconscious quiet moment. And I thought, that's the topic. So I then went to bed, got up, and then conscious thought comes in and you research the hell out of it for a few years. That's my journey.
Wow. Yeah, that you kind of dive into a couple different areas there, right? Because, what you're describing, to me at least, sounds like kind of like a mental health practice almost, right? Of shutting off your mind, shutting off distractions, and, kind of just letting your mind, I guess, kind of reset. That's how I view it. That's how I feel that it works for me, right? Do you ever, out of curiosity, do like float sessions or anything like that with sensory deprivation tanks? I've done that before, and it really helps me like reset my brain, if that makes any sort of sense. Which like I actually have to go do it here pretty soon, because it just helps you out so much, right? Is that something that you've tried?
I haven't done the deprivation one. I'd be definitely interested in doing that. But for me, it's just that, that meditation. And I'm not talking about the whole under a tree stuff, but that whole, they say focus on your breathing, but as soon as you're thinking, focus on your breathing, that's your conscious thought. I need to get to that, that subconscious where you're not thinking of anything, and that's when stuff comes to you. And to me, the best ideas have always come from that subconscious. And just to give you an idea, our conscious, when you're observing something, you and I are talking now, and we're actually observing information, our conscious thought absorbs, I'll just give you a number, but let's say, 1,000 bits per second, but our subconscious thought brings in, 500,000 bits per second. So our subconscious stuff that we're observing outside that we consciously don't think about, which we can't actually bring up because it's subconscious, we don't know about it. We can't actually bring up to the front of mind. That sort of stuff just stays hidden until you tap into it, and then you can draw on that information. And that's why hypnosis is good. Deprivation, meditation, all that stuff brings all the awesome stuff to light. And that's why, you've got songwriters or a writer, a book writer who have mental blocks, who just carry around a notepad. And if they're driving a car doing something boring, And that's when the ideas come to them in their head, not when they're trying to, research Twitter or read, university articles. It's that whole idea pop in the head is where all, inspiration comes from.
Yeah, it's like when you eliminate, all the other busyness or all the other noise from your brain. You're able to actually get through some breakthroughs and some great ideas. I've had that you described, in that twilight area, right, where you're not quite asleep, but you're almost asleep, and having that great idea. I've had it in both cases where I've had that and I woke myself up, right, and wrote it down real quick and revisited it the next day or 2 days later, whatever it might be. And then I've had that where it's like, oh, okay, I'll remember that when I wake up. And then I wake up and I don't remember it no matter how hard I try. It's like the most frustrating thing. And I'm starting to lean towards just having a notebook next to my bed when I go to sleep, because
you have to.
Yeah, if I have my cell phone there, right, and I go on my cell phone in this instance, the cell phone just wakes you up, because it has that blue light, and so it just wakes you up automatically, a little bit more than what you would want to be woken up, in my opinion.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is essentially mind hack. So having that notepad behind the bed, when something clicks to you in a subconscious thought that hits conscious thought, you write it down. But of course, when you think of something, don't write it down, wake up, can't think about it. That's per design. If you can't bring it back from subconscious because you've forgotten about it, it's designed to be in your brain that you can't bring unless you meditate. And look, I don't want this to be a hippy-dippy security chat show, but just that's how you can hack your own brain to get your ideas in front of people.
Well, yeah, I mean, this conversation, can go anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And in my years of getting into security and spending time in security, right? One of the things that I have learned is mental health and to take care of yourself and, exploring different ways of doing that, right? And I'm even on this podcast, I've talked about mental health previously at length. Because it's extremely important. And I feel like insecurity almost, people don't think about that, right? They're like, oh, okay, it's 9 to 5, you clock in, you clock out. You don't have anything to worry about, but they don't hear about the late nights, right? Where you're up until 4 a.m. because there's something critical, going on at the company and whatnot that you have to resolve. And so I really do enjoy using this platform to talk about that because I don't hear anyone else talking about it really. I mean, sure, there's a few other, instances and whatnot, but definitely something to dive into. So you were talking about, previously you were talking about how you kind of stumbled across this opportunity to do some consulting for a company, do some pen testing. And out of that grew this idea for Sim Monster. What were some of the challenges at the time that you had with creating, Sim Monster or the solution for Sim Monster? Because I'm sure, right, like, let's just say my company comes to you to create a sim that's open source, which is it's actually a huge deal because sims are extremely expensive. They're very cost prohibitive. And they take a huge amount of manpower to run, just within your organization, not even including the renewal rates and all that stuff. Was there unique challenges that you faced that maybe there was open source projects that essentially weren't existing at the time, or what year was it when you went down that path?
Yeah, it's a great question. So 2015 was when we started the Sea Monster project, to give you a rough year. And you're right. I mean, Elk by itself, Elasticsearch, Kibana, Logstash, Kibana, it's essentially, and now called Elastic, but that's a searchable database. Great. That's not a seam. That's just a searchable database. Then you've got to have all the other modules on top, incident response, EDR, MDR type platforms at the time, though, MDR. And you have reporting and ticketing systems, all that stuff. So you've got to go through all the open source nonsenses out there. Is it maintained? Do you want to maintain it? And then bring that into your suite. So we've always had what we call an open module project. So if there was something that was that was not being maintained, it would lose itself in the next build. We had people like, I think it was Palo Alto came to us with a product called MyMeld. That was an open source product they had, a MISP equivalent that we had in our product suite. And, that was great for a couple of years, and then we dumped it because there was a better offering on the market. So having modular was really good because we hit a market fit because customers already had tools out there, whether it be pen testing tools, they had incident response tools, they had ticketing systems, whether it be, Help Us Now or whatever, Land Desk, whatever they were using. So we could actually turn our modules off and let them use their modules. But for companies that didn't have the budget for a SIEM, we could come in and fit that slot. Our product would scale greater than Alien Vault, and it would scale up to Splunk, but without the price tag to suit. So in terms of challenges with any business, it's pain in the ass, like no money, paying AWS fees because we're a cloud stack, shitty tech, shitty open source, everything's shit. Customers who don't then want to pay for professional services. Like, you know what it's like running a business. Some of your listeners will too. I heard that conversation you had with Chris Roberts. We're running a business of pain in the ass. Like you could easily go and get a job in security. And sorry for all your new listeners on the call, but you could easily get a job earning $500,000 a year without this bullshit. And you could essentially clock in at 9, well, never 9 to 9 in our industry, but definitely 9 to 9 instead of 9 to 5 is probably closer to the mark, and then not sleeping at night times. But running a business is a pain in the ass. You need a good team. You're going to have highs and lows. You're going to have big clients. You're going to lose big clients. And look, would I do it again? Yes, but fuck. For those going out there, it's a huge risk, for everything on the line. You put your house on the line, you've got investors' money on the line, everything's on the line. They talk about the overnight success, 20 years later. But it's a great journey. Where else can you do that sort of stuff where you can talk to investors and do A rounds, B rounds, C? It's freaking awesome to learn stuff that you wouldn't have normally had in, just getting a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks.
Yeah, that is like I guess that's the biggest pro and con to me, in my own opinion, of, trying to do your own thing and navigate those waters, right? Because for me, I'm not in a situation, right, where I've overextended myself and, right, like you put your house up as collateral or anything like that, right? Thankfully, I haven't done that situation, but I know someone that has a group of friends where, these guys have made hundreds of millions of dollars, but they've also lost all of it like 2, 3, 4 times. I don't know if I would even be able to like handle that stress, right? Of losing it. Like once I put in all that work of earning that certain amount of money, right? Like I don't know if I could handle that. I don't know. It's a skill almost to be able to look at it differently from how other people would.
So it's essentially you're putting your balls on the line, and literally your balls. I mean, for me, I knew it was a great idea. Like I was already in the pen testing suite. There's plenty of money in pen testing, and I could see the market. It's just whether I could attract the market in the SIEM space. For me, it was like all in, and I didn't hesitate putting stuff on credit cards. I think I had 140,000 in credit cards and maybe $100,000 in loans just to get it where I wanted to be before I even approached investors and stuff like that. And was it scary? I wouldn't say scary, but maybe I could probably hid that from my own mind so I could keep, getting up in the morning. But it was fucking fun. You know what I mean? Like I knew it was a good idea, and I knew I could execute. It's just a matter of how much capital I could get in before I could get myself out of the shit, if that makes sense. And essentially, I think it took 3 years before, the first out of the shit. But then there's bigger numbers. Then you're not talking about, $250,000 in personal. Then you're talking about $2 million of investor money, to go to the next level. And then you're in different levels of shit. Then you're in a legal accounting hell. Like Chris Roberts said, you're in IRS and an ATO hell back in Australia. Like, it's fucking pain. It's a fucking pain. I don't know why I just stayed at the bank, $500,000 a year, sit back on my seat and talk shit on Twitter. I mean, fucking so much easier.
Yeah, it is. It is way easier. You could almost like get a career now just talking shit on Twitter.
Yeah. I'll be one of those. I'll be an influencer.
Right. Yeah, I mean with this podcast, right? It's like a double-edged sword with social media. You have to be out there. You have to be engaging all the time, but I'm not the type of person to engage all the time, right? If I don't have quality, content to say, or, input, feedback, whatever it might be, right? If I don't have something that I feel is of value, I'm not going to post about it, right? And in this game of podcasting and building an audience and all that sort of stuff, like I'm absolutely horrible at it, because I'll go, a week or two of no posts on Twitter, and that's like a huge red flag. That's a huge no. It's like, oh my God, why are you making that? You're losing all of your momentum. To me, it's just like, man, I have like five other things going on. I can't spend 20 minutes. I literally cannot spend 20 minutes researching the right hashtags and all this other stuff just to put together some, crafted post, right? That isn't even my own words anymore. So it's frustrating. I went on a tangent there.
No, it's a great tangent. And look, Clint Eastwood once said in one movie, he said, "A man's got to know his own limitations." And Joe, if you're not that sort of person, then don't fucking try to be that person. I mean, I look at Malware Jake. I love Malware Jake. He has great content, always great content, and the only thing I can do is just give him shit. Like, that's my skill set. Is I love poking people, same with Dark Matter, Alcantara. I just give them shit, and that's my skill set. I don't care. Not that I don't care. I'm not going to research something that's already public and then regurgitate it like I know the shit. Jake can do that. I've just got no interest in doing that, or skill in doing it. And so I just post shit, and like you, infrequently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so we talked about you being, a DEF CON speaker and whatnot. Was there, after you researched this death certificate vulnerability, right? After you researched that, did you start going down this rabbit hole of, documentation that the government uses for different benefits and things like that, and how to potentially, exploit the system? Or did you stop there? Or what was that like? Because for me, at least, I would start going down that rabbit hole of seeing like, oh, okay, can I get disability benefits? Can I get this? Like it'll snowball, and that's probably bad mentality in that situation. But where did you go after that?
Yeah, so if you notice that all my talks, I always do a talk and I also do a paper or a book. So I actually wrote a book up to that talk, so it was published straight after the talk with all my materials so people could research them and then take that research further. After a talk, I stop cold. I do not go down that rabbit hole and keep going. And like I said, with the bank scenario, like I'll work at a bank, get bored, and then move on. Same with the talk. I'll do a talk, present the talk, provide my material so people can go, Chris, that shit, you missed this step or you missed that. So people, I'm not a scientist, but as a scientist, people can actually look at my work and go, how did you get from A to B, and prove it. How did you get from A to B? So the answer to your question is I drop it dead and go to the next topic, or do nothing, and then just let the next idea formulate.
And okay, so then you just dropped the entire, government paper method, right? You just dropped that whole topic and then moved on to the next one.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So, what was your next talk about at DEF CON? I have to admit to you, it's not like I follow your career or anything like that, but I did see that first talk. What was your next talks about? What areas did you dive into? Did you, kill Jeff Moss a couple more times, different ways, or?
So the next talk I did with a mercenary called Simon Mann, who did a coup in Africa. So I did the how to overthrow a government in DEFCON 24 in 2016. So I actually worked with a mercenary on how you would overthrow a government and use Q8 as an example, and then hack their power, their government, their oil, their telcos, everything. So you can actually orchestrate your own coup using digital means. So that was essentially, that's probably my popular talk out there at the moment. And then I did another talk last year on how to bypass bomb jammers. So using a specific hardware, how I could actually get frequencies transmitted under a 9 kilohertz and actually detonate an IED under jammed environment.
Wow. Okay, so I mean, I feel like we could do a whole other podcast on cyber mercenaries alone.
Oh yeah.
You know, when we talk about cyber mercenary, can we break down what that is, right? Because to me, one, I've never heard the term before. And two, when I think about what a mercenary is in the military sense, I'm thinking, someone that's a lone wolf that's going in and impacting, I guess the power grid or impacting social media for a region and directing, political views and things like that. Is that what it is, or is there more to it? Do you ever see like more organized groups of cyber mercenaries that, it's like, hey, these 5 people are attacking the power grid in, I don't know, name a random country, right? And then these people are attacking the water supply. Is that what you've seen? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so you're partially right. So think of a mercenary. You don't think of a mercenary as a single mercenary. It's always a group of mercenaries, and they're ex-soldiers. It's guns for hire. The cyber mercs is essentially keyboards for hire. I mean, the exact same thing. There are people like myself or you or Chris Roberts, for example, who've got great technical skills, and they've been asked to do a job. And that job might be for a private organisation, and it's illegal. It might be for a government, which is illegal in some countries and not in others. And then you're essentially keyboard for hire. And you may be doing the job by yourself, or you might be doing a job by yourself. I'll give you an example. You've heard of Blackwater and Aegis and all that sort of stuff. They're, private military contractors. They're in a big ass company. There's a cyber division. It's essentially you have a cyber division that does these cyber merc tasks within that company, or it's an outside firm. So think of it as a big group.
That's really interesting. That's almost like organized cyber crime syndicates or something like that, right?
That is. I mean, people can dance around the subject. Cyber merc, cyber criminal. One man freedom fighter is another one's terrorist. It's exactly the same. I mean, you look at Simon Mann in Africa. He was asked by the English government to, do something over there. He did it. It was private money. He's a mercenary. He got caught. He went to jail. And then it's essentially it's a criminal activity, but people put mercenary in front of it and make it a clean title.
Is this something that you have seen, actually happen in the real world, right? Because immediately when we start, talking about what this actually looks like, of attacking the different portions of a country, I guess my American brain goes straight to America, right? And it's like, okay, did our power grid get attacked recently? Did our water supply, oil, whatever it might be, in my head it immediately goes to, oh, well, this attack was Russia, or this one was, attributed to China or whatever it might be. Do you see these criminal groups potentially even masquerading as these other, government powers, and maybe, this is all theoretical, right? I don't know shit about anything. Are they potentially like masquerading as China? Maybe they're a faction of cyber mercenaries in China, and they're attacking, let's just say, the U.S. power grid, for an example. Is that what you've seen, or is that how it works potentially?
Yeah, Joe, I am a cyber mercenary. I am a cyber merc by trade. So I know exactly what you're referring to, and the answer is yes. And it's not just country. It might be company within a country. So, you might be tasked with, doing a job within a company, within a country. It doesn't have to be the power grid. It can be something small. It can be a country. I mean, you look at your 2016 elections. Was there outside interference? Yes. Someone says yes. Someone says no. Of course, no one's going to say yes, there was. But there's always going to be, and that's the whole idea about mercenary. Did America help Ukraine break away from Russia? In 2008, the answer is yes. Obama admitted that. But it's never going to be. No one's ever going to say yes, that happened, or America were involved in the 1952 coup in Iraq. Like it's just one of those things where it's not going to be. Well, it's going to be tried not to be public because no one wants that public a perception that we did this, or we involved, or we hacked into this private company, or we did this, or we did that. So the answer to your question is it's all around us. It's always been all around us. And you get a tap on the shoulder. Can you assist with this? Yes, no. If you're a cyber merc, anyone who's listening is cyber merc, they know exactly how it rolls. You get a job across your desk and you decide whether you want to do it or not, and that's how it rolls.
Huh. Yeah, that's really fascinating. That's it's almost tempting to go down that rabbit hole, myself, right? But it's an interesting area that I mean, literally, I didn't even know that this area kind of even existed before, you brought it up. It is being in this kind of line of work. Can it be frustrating at times to, potentially participate in a project, right? Of, I don't know, let's just say hacking Microsoft, because Microsoft's been on my brain lately. Not saying that you did or anything like that, right? But let's say that you go through this project and then you see it portrayed in a different way in the news. Does that ever frustrate you, or does that ever, get to you to a certain extent? And I ask that because, I had Mike Jones on previously, and he said that when he was working for the NSA, he had the insider information and he knew the actual truth about a hack or about, an operation that he may have been, had some hands in some way, right? And then he would see it, how it was portrayed in the media, and it was completely opposite. It was completely different from the report that he actually wrote. And that was very frustrating for him. Do you ever come across that sort of situation as well?
Yes, but I don't get frustrated by it. It's one of those things is the media and the average Joe will interpret it a certain way, and then it becomes ego. Like if I do a job and it gets portrayed a certain way that doesn't fit with the way that I was doing it. A different position than myself with Mike is, that was his job and he got paid for his job. As a mercenary, you get paid money, so who gives a shit how it's portrayed? If I hack a bank and then find another hacker in that bank and then format disk, and then I might take their mark and throw it on another disk, so when it gets forensically, retrieved, they can see the mark of the other hacker there. For me, that's fucking funny. Like, I'm not involved. It's the check at the end. So obviously, if you work for the NSA, you actually give a shit about your country and all that sort of stuff. And of course, you have that whole, ego is the wrong word, but you have that, that confidence, that responsibility. You have that whole I love America mentality if you're going to work for the NSA. And for me, it was just a check. I don't give a shit how it gets portrayed, as long as I get paid.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you ever had that situation where you've hacked into a company and then you found another hacker? And
all the time.
You're planting like evidence for them to get discovered and not you and stuff like that.
All the time. That's our common method we use is we'll hack in. And even if they haven't hacked in, we'll throw their marks from other hacks on the target. So it's just one of those things like, man, why are we going to go down for this? Let them go down for it. So we'll throw their mark, their flag, their style on another server. Even going back to pen testing, we've hacked into legitimate porn companies who had hackers in there for 5 years that were taking the new, I'm going to use the word fresh models, but they had the new young models that they would then take that data and put on another site, and then they would then sell that porn legitimately after hacking the data. And they had a constant feed. So every time there was new models being updated, it would go to this other site and then they would sell that content. And they did that for 5 years. So they were just making money off other people's model money. So we see it all. And so when we did the pen test, we said, hey, you don't realize you got hackers in there. And they didn't take it to the police. Obviously, in the porn industry, you're not going to be, attracting police attention. So, they just asked to shut it down. And so it's pretty common. Like it's not uncommon for us to hack in to see other people in there. Sometimes you'll hack in and you just don't want to disrupt each other. So there's no point, causing havoc for each other. You'll just like bypass each other and keep going.
Huh. Wow, that is that's really interesting. That makes me think about the different hacks that have come out in the past and whatnot, and it makes me wonder if some of these hacks that, like, let's say America attributed it like directly to Russia or something like that, or some hacking group in Russia. I wonder if it was that situation where It was like, yeah, you attributed it to Russia because we made you think it was them, but it was actually, someone else or whatever it might be, which I guess I can use Russia as a good example because this podcast got blacklisted in Russia ever since they invaded Ukraine. So it's not like they're going to hear it.
Yeah, and look, and don't worry about that sort of stuff too. Look, if I did an interview with a journalist, 70% of what I say will be accurate and 30% will be inaccurate. Even like a recorded interview like we're doing now, they'll fuck it up, and they'll do that because they have their own agenda. Like it's got to meet their listening audience. Now, if you've got a government agenda on whether you want to attribute this to Russia or China, you may have, you may get a report from the NSA that we've got a 95%, we believe it's come from this, from this Russian group. And then they'll just go with it. You know what I mean? Because if it meets their agenda, they'll publish that it came from Russia, but they're not going to say, oh, well, we didn't get 100% certainty, so we're not going to publish. Is this the right time to bash Russia? Yeah, let's do it. Or China, or, name your enemy of the day. It seems like it'd be a constant thing with America is you always got to have an enemy. You just can't have quietness.
Yeah, that is a really interesting, I guess, mentality, right? That you bring up. Like, we always have to have some sort of adversary, right? That we're going up against, that we're doing things to protect ourselves from, or whatever it might be. And to a degree, that's exhausting. It's frustrating. It, at least for me, it makes me question, a whole lot of different things, right? It's like, well, are we being lied to about this and all that sort of stuff? Oh, sorry.
No, I wasn't going to interrupt you. I mean, I can't believe that you're still thinking whether you're being lied to or not. Like, the whole weapons of mass destruction thing is like, what the fuck? We did just give that a whole leave pass. You know what I mean? Like, it's that whole fucking, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, we're constantly being lied to about everything. And, even if something legitimate, let's say, I'm not an anti-COVID, so I'm not anti-COVID, but the government says do this, do that. We've been lied to so many times. No wonder fucking people go, I'm not fucking interested in your bullshit one more fucking time. There's always ends in chaos.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I actually, in college, I actually stopped watching the news or anything like that because I found that the news was just giving me so much anxiety about things that basically had no impact on my life at all. There was no point in me listening to anything that they said. And then I started going down the rabbit hole of, oh, they like legitimately, lied about WMD. Well, if they were going to lie about that, what else are they lying about? And so like I tried to sequester that in my brain to protect me from myself from going down that rabbit hole because I'm in this cybersecurity world and I can only go down so many rabbit holes at once. And I don't want to waste my time on the government's lies. Right.
Yeah. So what we do is we just, when I say we, it's a blanket lie. So everything's going to be a lie until proven otherwise. And I haven't got time to disprove their nonsense because they're creating the narrative. They're providing the evidence in front of me to say, this is the case. We're doing a no vote at the moment in Australia about Aboriginal rights. Now, it could be 100% legitimate and I should be voting no, but the government are telling me to vote yes. Now, as soon as the government tell me to vote yes, I'm not fucking voting yes. It's as simple as that. They've fucked us around so many times. I don't really want to be one of those people, but it's just embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't put up with this with anybody else. If your company kept lying to you about when you're going to get paid and you're never going to get paid, you straight away, it's non-trust. We have no faith.
Yeah, that would be a very real problem of, actually that reminds me, my wife, she's a teacher and earlier on in her career, she worked for like a private school. Right. And we didn't know it obviously, beforehand or when she started working there, but the guy who owned the school, was like double dipping across like several different companies. And he was using income from one company to pay for, teachers in this school and vice versa. Right. And it like started to come to light when her paycheck was late. It's like, well, wait a minute, paychecks are not normally late, and you're not getting paid in cash. Like, what the hell, And it all came out, and the school, just crumbled like right in front of everyone. Is insane. But I really want to talk about Simon Mann and how you guys got linked up, and maybe just a brief intro into his work and the coup that he created in Africa. Because for one, I know nothing about it. And so now, the very first thing that I'm going to be doing is looking him up after this podcast and trying to get him on for sure, because that's a fascinating line of work to be in.
He's awesome. And what happened was I was watching Netflix, and I can't remember, it was maybe 2014 or 15, maybe it wasn't even Netflix. But anyway, there was a 4-part episode on mercenaries, and he was actually on the show, and he was talking about how mercenaries operate. And he's an ex-SAS, UK soldier, beautiful. Look at his resume in terms of, he was in Iran, he was in Ireland and all that sort of stuff. So he had a beautiful resume, and then he just went down this other route, the mercenary route. And he wrote a book called Cry Havoc. It's a great book. There's some things that had to be cut out of that book. But so I actually contacted him and said, hey, this is what I do. I know what you do. Maybe we could work together. Now, originally he was supposed to come with me to the US and present at DEF CON, but he has travel restrictions. So we had to do we worked collaboratively together, and then I got a 1-minute pre-recorded session so I could show who Simon Mann was. And then we worked together for that, how to overthrow a government in the 2016 tour.
Huh. That's really fascinating about the travel restrictions with America, because he's a British citizen, and he has travel restrictions to America, which that makes me question a whole lot of other things, right? Because there's some very interesting reasons behind that, I'm sure.
Oh, for sure. He was in Equatorial Guinea. He was in a prison there for, I think he had a 9-year sentence, and he did 6 or 7 years.
Jeez.
Yes, for that failed coup. And the story was that he was actually commissioned to do this work by Margaret Thatcher's son, who loaned him a plane, and he had a fleet of mercenaries who didn't make it off the tarmac in South Africa, so they got caught. But it came out after the exercise. But it was one of those, they don't want shit to get out, so you only hear half the story. He probably won't tell you the whole story on air, but he'll tell you after if you get him on the call.
Yeah, for sure. It's I guess one of the key rules of a coup is to not fail at the coup, because then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, you got your balls are on the line, and then you're screwed.
Yeah. I couldn't. I don't. I guess I don't know what that mentality is like of going to prison and actually doing time, right? Because I've never done that. I've never gotten more than a speeding ticket, and so the whole thought behind going to prison and losing your freedom and your rights in that perspective is just, it's like almost terrifying to me. And I bring it up because I actually have a friend who could be serving time fairly soon, which it's just like, it really just messes with your mind, at least for me it does, right? Because it's like, man, this guy didn't think he was doing anything wrong. He was doing something wrong, and they're going after him with the book, right? It's like, makes me reassess everything. Like, well, what am I doing that could send me to prison, because I kind of want to avoid that,
Yeah, so it's, and you operate out of fear and by keeping you online, and that's the normal behavior. That's a human behavior. And your friend obviously thought he was doing the right thing. Again, you're always threatened. You have to do this, or this is going to happen. You're threatened by the IRF. You're threatened by your government. Threatened by police, threatened by lawyers. It's a constant threat. Now, if you can get that out of your head as like, they're just trying to control me with threats. Like even our parents did as kids, fucking do this or you're fucking you gotta go to bed with no TV. Do this or there's no dinner. That constant threat to manipulate behavior, if you can then circumvent that, you can circumvent in your mind like, no, fuck off, I'll do what I want. And then if you can then just reset that, then you essentially can do whatever you want to do. Of course, you've got the repercussions of prison. But again, your mate, is he walking around right
now? Yeah, he is for now at least.
Yeah, well, he can jump on a plane, go to Canada, go to Alaska, go to South America, go to Ecuador, go to fucking Georgia. He can go anywhere. He's got options. That he's not stuck. That's that whole fear of government. Then you can own that. Like you can do your time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, or you can just fuck off.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. It's a different mentality that I feel like I have to digest and actually work through and whatnot. So, Chris, I do apologize. We just went 50 minutes into our interview. We barely even talked about Sea Monster or anything like that.
You don't have to. You don't have to. This is what this talk's about. I'm happy to talk about any topic you want. This is not a business shill. Everyone knows what I do. If they want to use a product, they can. We can just talk socially. We don't have to talk about business.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I do want to talk about Sim Monster for sure out of my own curiosities, right? Because I have been stuck with Sims before and running Sims. I don't want to name any names, but these deployments of Sims that you pay millions of dollars for become extremely complicated very quickly. And it leads to one person basically knowing how it's actually deployed and run in the environment and whatnot. And whenever, at least from my perspective, right, as being a buyer of a solution, whenever I hear free sim, my mind immediately goes to I'm maintaining it myself. I'm screwed if this open source library, is no longer maintained and things like that. Um, and I think that you touched on this a little bit before, but from what I understand previously, you guys basically go into open source projects or bring them into your solution that you are willing to maintain yourself. And if they ever go out of, support, so to speak, you will either, have the choice of maintaining it yourself for your own solution or going a different route and going with some other open source solution, right? Is that correct? Or
yes,
okay.
You're spot on. So we have our own coders that will look at code base and go, can this be supported within our product suite? And then we will maintain the code. We lean heavily on companies like Wazoo, who have a great XDR solution, and they have a fleet of coders that keep that up to date. So we'll absorb that into our product. Because it's well maintained. But you're right, anything that gets decapicated or whatever, we will dump it from our suite so that we always have a stable product. If we're not getting any updates or patching, it's gone and gets replaced by a module that we write or another open source solution that's out there.
Now, is the product, I guess, designed in a way to where a broad range of people could actually come into this thing and run it? The reason why I ask again, and I'm sure you're well aware of it, for myself, I couldn't just jump into Splunk and start maintaining that thing. Like, that is a headache in and of itself. It takes a lot of different training to actually do it, in my opinion. Do you guys create it in a way and use these different open source libraries in a way to where really anyone could dive into this thing and learn it and use it efficiently?
Yeah, so it's a great question you asked. So essentially what we've done is, and you got to remember that the customers that we've attracted are customers who don't have a large budget. The customers who don't have a large budget don't have a large SOC team. They may be, 1, 2, 3 operators. Of course, we've attracted some large MSSPs that are happy to white label our solution, and then they have the staff to support it. But we've always had the customer base that we needed self-healing. So if there was ever an issue, that the product would self-heal, whether that module would self-heal. And we've had to make the product intuitive so that from out of the box, and we've learned that over time. 2015 product, 16, 17, 18 was not intuitive. But over that 8-year journey, we've turned our product into what we call an intuitive product. There's someone like you could jump in front of it. You could play with, say, 3 or 4 modules, get the hang of it, and move on to 4, 5, and 6. And then the suite. And if you get into trouble, it will self-heal. So much of the so that our product now, we roll the product out on AWS Marketplace with our support. So the product gets rolled out into your AWS environment when you can buy support, but you don't need support. We don't push support on you. So you can run our suite, upgrade your own product, and you don't need a support contract or anything. So you can have it up and running within, a couple of minutes, use it, and then if you like it, just keep using it. If you want support, you can get it. If not, there's enough documentation and self-healing in nature that you can use the product uninhibited by salespeople annoying the shit out of you. Because we're all from the same industry. Vendors suck. So we try to be a non-suck vendor.
Yeah, that's always refreshing to hear. Just dealing with vendors right now myself. It's frustrating, and yeah, it's frustrating to say the least. Everyone in this industry has experienced it. So that's really interesting with the no support model necessary, right?
Nope.
Um, is there a method? So, like, I always have a knack for running into the most random issues, that basically everyone that I talk to has no clue of what's going on. Is there like a forum that I could go to and, post a question and someone from the team would answer it or whatnot? Or do I have to like negotiate like a one-time fee for a support, situation?
So we've got multiple options. We've got a support portal where you can just lodge a ticket and then you can just pay per request. But to answer your first question, I made my engineers take off 6 months of their job to document everything that they knew, everything that they'd ever experienced, and put it on the support portal so that we did not require. So you're, one in a million or one that you've come across issue. It's already been discovered by our customers before, and we've made sure that it's everything that you've ever experienced has been documented. And I'm not talking just 80% of document, 100% that I could actually find my whole support team, and you can rely on this documentation. Of course, I wouldn't. We've got new products and blah blah blah, but my point is, I made it clear that I didn't want them doing any other work but documentation, because I'm a critical believer in you've got to document everything. But to answer your question, yes, you've got the full docs on site. If you want a support contract, you can get a support contract. Or if you've just got an hourly, you just want to ask a question for an hour, knock yourself out. You've got access to our SMEs to answer your questions.
Wow, that is really refreshing. It's not very often. I don't think I've ever encountered another security company that will actually, enforce a documentation requirement like that of like, hey, you're doing nothing else for the next 6 months, dump all that into, whatever, solution you had for it. I remember earlier on in my career, where I was leaving a position and I was the security, SME for this company. I was literally the only person at the company that did anything with security. And, of course, we would have random customers that have SE Linux issues after upgrades and things like that. And so I created my own, troubleshooting guide for everything that I did. You could search, in the field and everything else like that to look up the different, information and the exact command that you would have to run to get it working. And after I had left, it was common knowledge that you basically had to distribute it, but it wasn't a company policy even. It was like camaraderie type of thing within the team. It's like, hey, can you please like give me your troubleshooting guide, because like now I'm going to take over all your customers, and I need to know what you've been doing. It was more of that rather than someone else like actually forcing you to do it. So there was people that never maintained a document like that, never kept any notes on any of their customers. And when they left the company, it was like starting over. There were some situations where we actually had to like redeploy the solution because it was so custom in ways that didn't need to be custom. That, we just had to start over. We couldn't maintain it any longer. And it's just, I say all that because it's not a common thing, especially security or IT overall.
You're right, and because you're asking, I founded the company. I'm now the CISO, and I'm a security architect, pen tester by trade. So I know the deficiencies in our own industry, and documentation is always one of them. So I'm so anal that I'll monitor every ticket that comes in, and wondering why there's a fucking ticket that's come in, because the ticket shouldn't come in because it should be documented. So, I'm then on my team, and I'm, most of the time there's an article there that they didn't know was there. Why didn't they find it? And then if there's an issue that's coming that we've never seen before, it's got to be up on that fucking portal. But that's how I operate, because I'm running a software shop, not a support shop, if that makes sense. I want the software as good as possible. I don't need a team of 100 support staff. I don't want 100 support staff. I want a great product. A support if you need it, but documentation is the key. Because if you're working on something, do you really want to contact me at fucking 10 o'clock at night that there's an issue and go through that whole bullshit? Or do you want to fucking see an article, how the fuck do I do this? And then you get an answer pop up. That's what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd much rather just have the answer and not
Yeah,
bother
yeah,
someone in the middle of the night, you know?
yep.
Well, Chris, it's been a fantastic conversation. I absolutely want to have you back on sometime in the future and dive more into, cyber mercenary stuff and, talk about your bomb jammer or whatnot. But, I'm a stickler for time myself. I try to respect everyone's time. And even now, we're over a couple minutes, right? But before I let you go, how about you tell my audience, where they could find you if they wanted to, reach out to you, and what your company's website is if they want to learn more about Sea Monster.
Thanks for that, Joe. And I've loved being on it, mate. It's loved talking to someone like yourself in the industry, right in the guts of it, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's lovely just to share those ideas. Look, my website, really easy, chrisrockhacker.com. All my talks, all my books, all my articles, all my upcoming talks are on that site, chrisrockhacker.com. And Sea Monster is just SIEmonster.com if you're looking at SIEM products.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode.